Now. All right. I wanted to kick off first with a few reminders. So just for everyone who has joined today, the Clean Buildings First Movers webinar series is a peer learning opportunity to showcase and uplift Maryland buildings pursuing decarbonization. So guest speakers such as ours today, UMBC, will be sharing firsthand experiences on advancing building decarbonization upgrades, imparting lessons learned, and they will also answer questions about their building decarb journey. And I did also want to note for anyone who might be interested, if you want to be featured as a guest speaker at any future First Movers webinars to talk about your building decarbonization strategy efforts, anything related to those topics, we would love to hear from you. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us at building.decarbonization@maryland.gov. And again, we will be sharing any email addresses, links, resources after the presentation, but just wanted to put that out there. If anyone wants to participate in this web series, we would love to hear from you. All right. And then I did also want to note that this presentation will be conducted in webinar mode, meaning that all you great attendees today, you cannot turn on your mics or use the general chat. However, we do want to hear from you in terms of your questions, especially for UMBC. So you can use the Q&A feature, which you can navigate to by clicking on the 9 dots in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. So you click on those 9 dots, it'll come up with meeting tools, and then there is a Q&A feature that you can select and ask your questions. Feel free to put questions in there throughout the presentation, but just know we will wait until the end to answer those. All right, I think with that, we can officially get started here. So just quickly, we have an agenda. As a reintroduction, again, my name is Megan Lackey. I support the Hub, and I'm also a program manager at the Maryland Energy Administration, and I will be your host today. I'm very excited to share that we have Taylor Smith with us in the house, the Assistant Director of Sustainability at UMBC, as our guest speaker, and he will be sharing more about UMBC's decarbonization journey, including benefits, hurdles, successes, key strategies, lessons learned, and much more. So really looking forward to that. So just to kick things off, I will be talking a bit about the Maryland Clean Buildings Hub, also known as the Hub, talk about its purpose, mission, as well as some key resources for building owners and operators in Maryland. I'll also touch on some upcoming building decarb grant funding opportunities and some new BEPS-related resources, and then I will go ahead and pass the mic to Taylor. Okay, so what is the Maryland Clean Buildings Hub, or the Hub? For anyone who isn't aware, the Hub is an initiative of the Maryland Energy Administration, which aims to empower Maryland building owners to make well-informed energy investments in their facilities. And we want to connect them to technical, financial, and educational resources, which may range from funding directories, vendor and service provider lists, building decarbonization planning guides, facility spotlights, case studies, and more. So with that being said, I really encourage everyone here to explore the Hub's newly updated website and look into all the available resources that really may help you advance any building decarbonization efforts you want to pursue. I also want to note that the Hub has a growing YouTube channel that hosts a number of informative webinar recordings and videos covering a variety of grant program opportunities, building sector-specific conversations, and more. And then last, if you're not already signed up, please consider subscribing to the Hub's monthly newsletter. It is excellent, and it helps you stay informed on all the latest news, including relevant funding and financing announcements, educational offerings, events such as this webinar, case studies, and more. So all those links are included in this presentation, and you will again receive this deck after the webinar concludes. Okay, so just wanted to touch on a couple items here in terms of the Hub ethos. We really want to highlight partnership and education. One of the most valuable aspects of the Hub's work is connecting key stakeholders in the industry to learn from one another. Peer-to-peer learning allows us to share real-life experiences best practices, strategies, anything like that that can help others apply to their own building decarbonization plans. It also helps build a sense of community and may help even accelerate progress across the board in terms of building decarbonization efforts. So we really want to see that happen and help you guys get to where you want to go. And then, of course, the hub is designed to be a go-to resource for Marylanders navigating their clean energy and building decarbonization journeys. Whether you're just exploring options or you're already deep into project planning, our goal is to connect you with tools, guidance, and resources throughout the entire process. So please don't be afraid to reach out to us, visit our website, use any of the resources that we have available for you. We also want to note that there is no single right time to begin advancing building decarbonization efforts, whether you're upgrading existing systems, planning future renovations, or simply assessing your building's energy use. Every step forward counts, and the hub can help provide support along the way. All right, last item here, working together. We know that decarbonizing our buildings isn't always simple, but collaboration can help make it possible. So by working together, sharing knowledge, tips, key takeaways, we can overcome these challenges and pave the way for buildings that are more comfortable, efficient, resilient, and reducing costs and carbon emissions in the long term. So just some key takeaways there for all of you on the call today. I will move over to our next slide. Just a few announcements I want to touch on that may be relevant to those of you who are joining us today. So first, as some of you may know, I am also the program manager of the Electrifying Community Buildings Grant Program at the MEA. For those of you who are looking to apply to this program, it is specifically for community serving buildings whose primary purpose is to serve the public, and you're looking to replace existing fossil fuel powered equipment with efficient electric alternatives. That program deadline to apply is the end of the year, December 31st. So please make sure you are getting those grant applications in on time. And if you have questions, there are 2 virtual Q&A sessions that I will be hosting before the end of the year. One coming up next Thursday, November 13, and another on Tuesday, December 9th. Please feel free to register to join, and I will be there. It'll be casual. Ask any questions you have. I will do my best to help you out. Okay, next item here, Commercial and Industrial Grant Program. Many of you may be interested in this grant opportunity as well. This program is managed by my colleague, Chris Russell, and it covers both new construction and existing building projects, and it's intended to help defray the cost of building improvements that result in energy performance exceeding current codes or standards. So to learn more about this program, I encourage you to watch last week's Commercial and Industrial Kickoff webinar if you missed it, which is posted on the Hub's YouTube channel. So again, I have the link here in the slides, but I will be sending the deck out after the presentation if you want to watch that webinar recording. Please also feel free to visit the Commercial and Industrial website where you can review the program's funding opportunity announcement, FAQs, and also some short informational videos. All right, last but not least here, I wanted to call out that we do have a third-party benchmarking verification resource webinar coming up. The Maryland Clean Buildings Hub has partnered with the Institute for Market Transformation's Building Innovation Hub on Wednesday, November 19th, and that is to showcase a new set of resources to help Maryland building owners meet the Building Energy Performance Standards third-party verification requirement. And that needs to be submitted to the Maryland Department of the Environment starting on June 2026 for any BEPS covered buildings. So this could be a great opportunity for any of you out there who may be interested. So register for this webinar and join the 2 hubs as they provide an overview of the new resources. They're going to walk through a sample vendor scope of work, checklist, and also answer any frequently asked questions. Okay, and then last but not least here, I do also have a link to all fiscal year 2026 MEA grant programs that are available. So if you want to learn more, see what else is out there that may apply to you, I encourage you to explore that as well. Okay. Now, before I pass things over to Taylor to kick us off, I just wanted to reiterate one more time That again, the hub is here for you, and we provide a range of offerings to help Maryland building owners, operators, and others make well-informed investments in their properties by providing technical, financial, and educational resources. You can access these resources by visiting the hub, our new website, our YouTube channel, subscribing to the newsletter. So please, I highly suggest taking advantage of those and reaching out to us if you have any questions at building.decarbonization@maryland.gov. All right, now, without further ado, I will pass the mic to our guest speaker today, Taylor Smith, to talk about UMBC's building decarbonization journey.
Thank you, Megan. Really appreciate that. Let me get this set up here with the screen share. All right. So first and foremost, I just want to thank the Maryland Energy Administration for allowing us to be here today and to share our work. We're excited to be on this journey together, working to decarbonize Maryland. And of course, as a state institution, UMBC wants to do our part to make sure that we are achieving these very ambitious sustainability goals that the state of Maryland has set. So my name is Taylor Smith. I'm the Assistant Director of Sustainability here at UMBC. I work with a great team, Nicole Wolf and Layla Kyra, support our office, and we are continuing to make progress towards the state's decarbonization goals. But first, let me start with a brief overview of UMBC. We like to think of ourselves as a community and ecosystem of interrelated parts. So we serve a student body of about 14,000 students, including full-time and part-time students. We have a building portfolio of over 80 buildings that support our student body. And these are situated on around 500 acres of land between our various campuses. And I'll mention for this group specifically that we have 32 buildings that fall under the BEPS compliance requirements at over 35,000 square feet. So of our building portfolio, 32 of those are subject to BEPS. So what does our Office of Sustainability actually do? We have an ambitious vision for our campus to serve as a sustainability leader within not just the University System of Maryland, but also among our nationwide peers. I think there's a lot that we can learn from peer institutions like University of Vermont, Princeton University, and others. And so we are doing our part to make sure that we serve our communities in a similar way. The mission of our office is to enhance the culture of sustainability at UMBC. We operate under a fairly modest budget, and our goal is to make sure that we can infuse sustainability and the principles of decarbonization and clean energy into all the projects that we serve. So we work very, very closely with our facilities management department and others across campus to make sure that we are aligning with BEPS and other sustainability goals within the state. A great way to do that is to pursue grant funding. Megan spoke to this earlier, and we've been very proud of some of the progress we've been able to make on grants, and that has allowed us to push forward with additional projects that otherwise might not have happened. So the core office activities that we participate in, I like to put this down into 3 buckets. The first category is reporting. And this is a variety of internal and external reporting. Certainly BEPS falls into this category. We also support infrastructure projects on campus. As I mentioned, working very closely with facilities management to work on building decarbonization and a variety of other projects. And then our final category is engagement, where we work with the student, faculty, and staff communities to provide a variety of engaging office activities, everything from volunteering to local activism to career fairs and career connections. So UMBC actually has made a lot of progress in the past. I won't dwell too long on this slide, but I think we've come a long way since sustainability really started its journey at UMBC back in 2007 when we signed the American College and University President's Climate Commitment. And so since that time, we've reduced our electricity per square foot by about 34%. We're also purchasing a tremendous amount of renewable and carbon-free electricity. And then in the bottom right corner, one stat I'm particularly proud of is that over 80% of the UMBC community expresses a moderate or strong interest in sustainability. And as a institution, a place of higher education, it's really important for us, not just from a feel-good perspective, but also a strategic perspective to think about where our students and prospective students are coming from. And so we do see in our survey data that most of the UMBC community is really aligned with this type of work. So enough about UMBC. What I'm showing here is a graphic from the state of Maryland's Climate Pollution Reduction Plan. So this is a publicly available plan that the Maryland Department of the Environment has put out there. This is our pathway to reach net zero statewide. There are a few important milestones in this graphic. By 2031, the state plans to reach a 60% reduction in statewide greenhouse gas emissions compared to our 2006 or 2007 baseline. And we also want to achieve, and in fact are required to achieve, net zero emissions from large buildings by 2040. And these are areas where the BEPS regulation is really working to support those statewide goals. So we'll take a quick look at how UMBC is performing currently along this same type of trajectory. So at UMBC, as I mentioned before, we've been on our sustainability journey since 2007. And since that time, we have successfully reduced our campus-wide emissions across all categories that we track by almost 50%. And we're very proud of that. This is against a backdrop where UMBC's building footprint has actually increased by about 30% over the same time period. Our student body, the number of students that we serve, has increased by about 25% over that same period. And yet we've achieved a almost 50% reduction. Now that said, the remaining 50% is the difficult part, right? So you start with the low-hanging fruit. By the time you've reduced emissions by 50%, the next 50% is a whole lot harder. So we're kind of on that journey all together. For those of you taking a very close look at this, what you might notice is the bottom category on this graphic, the red category, is on-campus combustion. That basically reflects all of the natural gas and other combustion fuels that we use here on campus within our buildings primarily. And that level has stayed relatively flat over the past 15 years or so. And so we need to refocus on this area. And again, that is where BEPS is really focusing in. So just to give people, a general overview of BEPS, for those who may be a little bit less familiar with some of the regulation, BEPS applies to buildings that are 35,000 square feet or larger. So as I mentioned, UMBC has 32 such buildings on our campus qualifying under BEPS. Benchmarking actually started in 2025, reporting on calendar year 2024. So hopefully most of our attendees will have reported, but if not, I know MDE and Maryland Energy Administration are working with building owners to try to catch up on our reporting requirements. Benchmarking is completed in Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which a lot of commercial building managers already use to track and report on their energy use and their energy performance. You can complete benchmarking yourself if you have a good handle on your building footprint and your utility usage, or you can choose to work with a consultant and allow them to do the reporting on your behalf. It's really your choice. It sort of depends on what you're comfortable with and what some of those cost implications could be. As Megan mentioned earlier, third-party verification is going to be required every 5 years, starting next year in 2026. And there is a webinar. I'm already registered for it on November 19th, and I'm excited to hear a little bit more about how that third-party verification piece is going to work. And then the last piece I'll mention is that in 2026, there's a relatively modest administrative fee of $100 per building, and that will be assessed annually. And that's something that was added into the BEPS requirement within, I believe it was House Bill 49, which passed last legislative session. So this is a pretty high-level overview, but I do encourage folks on this call to check out the online BEPS portal, as well as the MDE's BEPS benchmark. It's really pretty good. I've gone back and referenced it several times to help us through our reporting process over the past year, and I think they've done a really nice job with that. So encourage you to check that out on the website. Continuing with a couple final points. So BEPS applies to two main categories. Number one, it seeks to reduce and eliminate direct greenhouse gas emissions that are produced on site. This generally refers to any combustion equipment burning natural gas or fuel oil or other combustion fuels on site. BEPS is striving to drive those emissions down to zero. And in the future, BEPS will include energy use intensity standards, which is really just a fancy way of saying efficiency standards. So we want to get to a point where we're using less energy per square foot of building space. Each type of building, or most types of buildings, have different standards. And so the requirements that are placed on a higher education institution like UMBC are not the same as an office building or an aquarium or any other variety of building types. I think there's 50 or more different building types that are defined in the regulation. So building owners need to meet direct greenhouse gas emission and EUI or efficiency standards starting in 2030 or pay alternative compliance fees. And those standards do become a little bit more strict over time, all the way up through 2040. So there's a bit of a soft roadmap between 2030 and 2040 where these requirements get a little bit more stringent. Primarily, the BEPS regulations refer to, again, direct greenhouse gas emissions and building efficiency. Those are the two deep green categories that we have towards the bottom of the screen. There is a small carve out for on-site renewable electricity. So if you're in a situation where on your property there's a chance to pursue some on-site renewable electricity like wind or solar, House Bill 49 did provide some carve-out space for that type of on-site generation that can have an additional BEPS benefit. Okay, so now for the fun part. Working on our team here at UMBC and experiencing this myself a little bit, we have what I'm calling the 5 stages of decarbonization grief. And this is sort of modeled onto the classic 5 stages of grief that, for anyone who's experienced a loss, you kind of have seen this sort of typical, or maybe experienced this sort of typical cycle. The first step is denial. So, MDE, the state of Maryland, they can't possibly be asking us to do this. And moving on through the stages, you might get to anger, where we feel that our jobs as building managers and building owners are already hard enough. If you can get to the bargaining stage, if you can help your teams get to the bargaining stage, that's really the hardest part done. That's where you start to think about, how would we actually achieve this? What are some possible solutions? What's a timeline that we might be able to work with? As you start asking those questions, you might realize, wow, this is going to be really hard, and it is. I would argue it's only hard because we didn't start 25 years ago. So it's kind of like saving for retirement. The best time to start is 25 years ago, but if you can't, next best time to start is right now. And then moving on to acceptance, let's work the problem. if we don't start now, when are we going to start? What are some of the tactical steps that we can be taking today? So I hope you find this a little bit helpful. If you find yourself at one of these stages, just know that you're not alone. So some of the big picture benefits of BEPS, and a lot of these are discussed in the regulation itself, or they're discussed in some of the supporting materials on the BEPS website. Number one, the U.S. Department of Energy national labs have taken a look at these BEPS regulations, and over a longer time horizon, 25 years or so, average buildings are expected to save, over $4 per square foot in energy costs. Now, there is a lot of variability between buildings. Of course, everyone's situation is different, but just know that there is an option here, or not an option, but there is a pathway where this can actually be cost positive. The combination of both direct greenhouse gas emissions and future site efficiency or site energy use intensity standards, that delivers efficient electrification, which means there's less grid strain, there's less demand on the grid, and that helps everybody. That means less investment in the state and regional grid, the national grid, that would require expensive upgrades. So for anyone who's familiar with, transmission line projects, right here in Baltimore County, for instance, always controversial, always expensive, efficient electrification can help to mitigate some of those negative effects. And finally, decarbonization efforts, they create immediate air quality benefits in your local community and surrounding communities. Air quality does not pay attention to political boundaries. Actually, the Maryland Department of the Environment has a great environmental justice screening tool that's easy to find on their website, that shows how different communities around the state experience levels of air quality that are, let's say, not equitably distributed. And so here in Baltimore County, some of our neighbors in Baltimore City and other areas do experience poor air quality, and a lot of these efforts for building decarbonization can directly benefit these communities. Okay, but that's enough of the big picture, right? So let's say I'm a building owner, maybe I'm a developer, I'm only going to own a building for 5 years. Why should I bother making some of these investments, where I'm not going to see a payback for 25 years? Number one, a lot of these investments can have a positive return on investment and can be cash flow positive. We'll take another look at this in a little bit, but often the assumption is that switching to electrification will be more expensive. You're going to spend more on electricity than you will on natural gas or other fuels. That can be true, but there are options that can be cash flow positive. And in fact, some of the projects that we'll share later fall into that more beneficial category. There's also immediate benefits in enjoying higher property values, which leads to lower borrowing and insurance costs. So you see this benefit immediately. You can also experience higher budget certainty. So anyone who is managing a natural gas account when Russia invaded Ukraine may have seen very high volatility in natural gas prices, and there really is a benefit to budget certainty. Generally, electric prices are more stable than volatile fossil fuel prices. There's a variety of good data from U.S. Green Building Council and others that show that green buildings enjoy a higher tenant demand, retention, and market rents. And then there are many existing utility, local, and state funding programs, many of which come through the Maryland Energy Administration. And these may be fleeting, so you should take advantage of these now, before decarbonization becomes commonplace and sort of the status quo of doing things. There are a lot of carrots out there that you can take advantage of. So on the item of cost, one response I hear a lot is that, a heat pump is going to increase my energy costs. And this is a graphic from our friends over at the Maryland Department of the Environment. It is geared towards residential heating, so there is a caveat there. But we're looking at the relative prices or operating costs of different types of heating equipment. You know, everything from your electric resistance furnace or electric resistance hot water heater through efficient gas furnaces, and then looking at heat pumps towards the bottom. And it is true that heat pumps struggle in cold conditions. You know, on the very coldest days of the year, the heat pump may not operate super efficiently. It may even rely on backup electrical resistance heating. But those conditions are only experienced for a few days in the coldest areas of the state. And so, you know, lower efficiencies on a few days of the year do not outweigh the relative benefits that you can enjoy throughout the remainder of the year, right? Through all the shoulder seasons, through the summer. And so I think there's a little bit of a misconception out there that electric is always more expensive. MDE is sharing this data that shows that heat pumps can be a more efficient, cheaper way to operate your buildings. But don't take MDE's word for it. Just look at Vermont, just look at Canada. The numbers of heat pumps that are sold in Vermont and Canada climb every year. If they can do it in Canada, they can certainly do it in Maryland. And these numbers would not keep going up if the technology was not working reliably. Okay, now we're going to jump into this is actual data, real data for UMBC. UMBC was approved to follow the campus compliance pathway. What that means for us is we aggregate all of our building space together and we report on all of our utility use together. We have 84 buildings totaling over 4 million square feet. And based on our energy use during calendar year 2024, you can see our current performance in direct greenhouse gas emissions and energy use intensity. Now, we need to get our direct greenhouse gas emissions all the way to 0 by 2040, and we need to lower our energy use intensity significantly. Now, I mentioned earlier in the presentation that the energy use intensity targets are not yet set in regulation. That is true. We've sort of cheated a little bit, and we went back and looked at an earlier version of BEPS that was not adopted, and we have taken a educated guess as to what we think our final standards and interim standards might be for energy use intensity. So for this group, it just gives a general overview that we need to, basically become twice as efficient as we currently in terms of our energy use intensity. So key strategies to reduce emissions. Number one is we want to not install any new fossil fuel service. We don't want to bring any new gas lines into campus. Number two, we want to replace old fossil fuel equipment with electric alternatives, such as high efficiency heat pumps. And we want to stop hitting the easy button and always replacing things in kind. It's really easy to just pull out old gas equipment and put in new equipment. But if you're going to put in a new gas burning furnace, that furnace is probably going to be there for 25 years. And so that furnace is not going to be BEPS compliant. So you really want to take a careful look whenever you're replacing. Of course, prioritize your energy hogs and low performers, which usually means your older buildings. Evaluate options for deep energy retrofits, which is to say, look at a building comprehensively. It's not just about replacing a furnace or a hot water heater. If you're doing a building renovation, really think about, how can we look at our building envelope? How can we look at our windows? If we're already doing a roof replacement project, does it make sense to go for a product that has a higher R value, basically a more insulating roof? Start to think about these comprehensively. And then finally, evaluate opportunities for on-site renewable energy if you have a site that may be suitable for such an approach. There are a variety of funding opportunities out there. I think Megan was being modest earlier when she identified the Electrifying Community Buildings Program, as well as the Commercial and Industrial Grant Program. MEA has a variety of grant and loan programs, so like and follow and look at their site to see what programs might come along in the future. That's focusing on state benefits, but there's also, the Montgomery County Green Bank does great work providing local funding, and all the utility providers in the state provide incentive programs through the Empower Maryland program. As a homeowner, I've taken advantage of many of these programs, but there are also business and commercial incentives. If you are a ratepayer, you are already paying into these utility programs, so take advantage and try to get some of that money back through these utility incentives. So how are we going to do it? We're going to do it one bite at a time. UMBC has 84 buildings. 32 of those buildings are qualifying buildings, and we need an individualized approach for every one of them. The first thing we're doing is we're focusing on building efficiency. As a state institution, UMBC follows the Maryland High Performance Green Building Program. We're required to follow it, but hey, you can follow that program too as a building owner, even if you're a private company. We currently have 6 LEED buildings on campus. We are working on our 7th, Sherman Hall, which has been ongoing for about a year. And that building renovation is a full gut job, and we are expecting to save between 80 and 85% of the energy use within that building, which is pretty incredible. We're also in the planning phases for future construction on campus, and we do anticipate that we will have a highly sustainable, highly efficient building to provide student services across our campus. We're also engaging in a campus clean energy master plan. This was supported through a Maryland Energy Administration program called the Higher Education Clean Energy Grant Program. But even if you're not a higher education institution, there are similar programs that can provide funding. We're basically doing master planning to model the current performance of our buildings and look at how different investments, different energy conservation measures can benefit across our campus. It's also critically developing strategies to help us decarbonize some of our district energy systems. We actually have 2 district systems on campus, which send hot and chilled water through underground pipes to service large portions of our campus, including our residence halls and our academic buildings. These are highly efficient systems, but they're 60 years old and they use the technology of the past. And so we are looking at strategies to decarbonize and come up with strategies as to how we can wean ourselves off of these systems. And this study is also critically looking at electrification and thinking about how various investments are going to affect our grid capacity and electrical infrastructure and possible needs in terms of switchgear, substation, or other improvements. So that's kind of big picture. Let's drill down now onto a couple of ongoing building renovation projects. Again, 2 of these building projects were supported through Maryland Energy Administration funding. In this case, through the Electrifying Community Buildings Program. We worked with partners in the private sector, in this case, Train Technologies, to come up with some energy estimates and to start to begin to think about equipment and technologies that we can put into these buildings to take out the old polluting fossil fuel equipment and put in clean, efficient heat pump technologies. In the case of 900 Walker Avenue, we're looking to reduce our energy use by about 21%, critically lowering our energy efficiency, our energy use intensity rather, to about 56 kBTUs per square foot, which gets us below our final target of 56, if you're recalling from an earlier slide. In the Technology Research Center, we've got more work to do, but we're still looking at a substantial energy savings of around 32%. And then on Sherman Hall, just to mention again, we are expecting to save about 80% of the energy use in that building. That building actually is not sub-metered currently, but based on our rough guess, based on an average building performance, we think we'll be well within the targets under BEPS once that renovation is complete. So a few areas of uncertainty, right? We've got this cloud of uncertainty looming over a lot of these projects. Number one for us is, how do we value non-financial benefits of sustainability projects? I think this is particularly salient for us as a higher education institute. Do these types of investments make us more attractive to prospective students? Do they create research opportunities and workforce training opportunities on our campus? You may be in a slightly different boat, but you can ask yourself, how do these types of investments make us more attractive to tenants, or make us more resilient to future climate events? So there's a lot of non-financial stuff that really we can be thinking about as additional benefits when we go through these projects. What are energy markets going to look like? No one really knows this, but of course, regional renewable energy continues to increase. Electric prices and gas prices continue to increase, but there's a lot of uncertainty around artificial intelligence and the amount of electricity that is consumed in those processes. So, of course, there's uncertainty, which can be challenging. And then the last item I want to touch on is sort of policy change and technological innovation. Right now, we're not getting a lot of federal support for sustainability and decarbonization initiatives, but that could change. Likewise, technological innovation is going to go a long way before we're hitting the BEPS threshold of 2040 and some of our final goals. I like to tell people that the iPhone is only 15, 16 years old. Just think about where we're going to be in another 15 years. Heat pump technology is advancing rapidly and is going to continue to make a lot of progress. So I'll leave you with these top 5 lessons learned as we've been going through our projects here at UMBC. Number one, be brave. Inaction carries its own risk. We can do hard things. Don't let the cycle of analysis paralysis stop you. It's never too early to start planning. And there's a lot of things that we can do that we know are directionally correct. They're the right things to do, even if we don't know the exact effect just yet. So for example, if you are still using incandescent light bulbs, switching to LEDs is really a smart thing to do. If you have a server room that you're keeping at 65 degrees, raising the set point is something that's pretty easy to do. Number two is of course, understand your site. Are you located in an overburdened or underserved community? This can make a big difference in terms of some of the funding opportunities that are out there through the Maryland Energy Administration and others. I definitely would start, I'd recommend starting with a long-range roadmap. In our case, that is our Clean Energy Master Plan, but it may be a slightly smaller scale depending on your situation. And then think about how individual projects and investments can fit into that long-term plan, considering funding and timing. Number 4, collect and highlight peer case studies and success stories. Hopefully we've done some of that today in talking about our ongoing building renovation projects and some of the projects that we have in the pipeline. Work to build your own portfolio, but think about how your peers are finding success. I really like this Clean Buildings Hub because people are generally open to sharing information and trying to find shared solutions. And then finally, communicate early and often with the Maryland Energy Administration. If you're confused about something, seek clarification, subscribe to their newsletters. I've always found Becky and Megan and Kristen and Diego and others at the Maryland Energy Administration to be very helpful, highly responsive, and they've been good partners because again, everybody's kind of pulling in the same direction here. So with that, I will turn things back over to Megan and the Maryland Energy Administration, but I thank you for your time. I hope that this has been helpful. And please reach out if we can provide more information or backup for any of this information to help you along your way. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Taylor. That was excellent. I feel like we've all gained so much knowledge after this presentation, learned a lot. So thank you again for joining us today. And I've been monitoring the chat throughout your slide deck, Taylor. We've been getting a lot of fantastic questions. I hope we have time to get through all of them. So I will start going through and toss over some cues to you.
Sounds good.
All right. So we have a question from the audience asking that Taylor mentioned 30 plus buildings fall into Maryland BEPS. For the others, do you voluntarily benchmark or take other decarbonization actions?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So on campus, we have, again, 32 qualified buildings, but about 84, 85 total buildings. We could choose to individually benchmark the 32 qualifying buildings, but instead we have chosen to follow the campus compliance pathway in which we aggregate all of our buildings together and all of our utility use. So this does a couple things. Number one, it lowered the administrative burden for us to report on our buildings because basically when everything's aggregated, it makes all the data entry a lot simpler. We've also chosen to follow this pathway because several of our qualifying buildings are not sub-metered. And so it would be very challenging for us to track and report on the individual use of those buildings. Sherman Hall is a good example of that, where we have a building renovation project ongoing, but we don't actually have sub-metering data. We will after the project's done, but of course that doesn't really help you. But the main reason we did it is because when you aggregate all of your buildings, it just gives you more flexibility to find solutions. Maybe we have smaller buildings where we can make immediate investments today that will cut down on our carbon footprint. So, we may change that strategy in future years, but at this point, we believe that the campus compliance pathway gives us the most flexibility. You could look at it as sort of voluntary compliance with those smaller buildings, but we're really just looking at it as a more flexible path for us to follow.
Amazing. Thank you, Taylor. Next question we have here, is there a plan for reducing the on-site combustion at UMBC?
So there is. Certain elements of it are still pretty nascent. There's not a lot of detail behind. So the key thing, the critical thing is we are currently engaging with a decarbonization engineering firm to create a clean energy master plan. And that clean energy master plan is going to have three main buckets. The first bucket is focusing on our district energy system, which serves most of our academic campus. And this is an enormous infrastructure investment that UMBC has made 50, 60 years ago, maybe even longer. And so this engineering study is taking a very hard look at our existing district system to come up with technologies to replace that old infrastructure. And that's the most challenging piece. And that's really where we have the most uncertainty at the moment. But that's why we're engaging in planning. And that's why we were very thrilled to get some grant funding through the Maryland Energy Administration, which allowed us to move forward with that study. The second bucket is our satellite plant. So we have a second district energy system, but basically it's a smaller system. It operates at a lower, more conventional 180-degree operating temperature. And so we do expect that we'll be able to use some heat pump technologies and probably decarbonize that at the source. And then the last category, and this may be the most interesting for the person asking this particular question. The last category is everything else, right? So we have probably, 30 or 40 other buildings that are not on a district system, that are standalone buildings. They have their own utility service. They have their own independent HVAC, air handling units, hot water heaters. And so it really is on an individual basis, taking a look at the technologies in those buildings and basically figuring out, how do we replace these old polluting fossil fuel equipment with heat pump technologies or other similar technologies? And so that does require some engineering thought. It requires an evaluation of the electric infrastructure you have serving that building to make sure that the electric service can support heat pump technologies. But it really is about finding a solution for each individual building. And that's why the analogy of eating the elephant, one bite at a time makes sense. Because if you have 30 buildings, you've got to focus on one at a time, or in smaller pieces at least. I think that's really the way to go to find success in this.
Great. Thank you, Taylor. Another question from the audience here. A lot of good ones coming through. Thank you to everyone on the call. How did you determine which university buildings were the highest priority for decarbonization?
Great question. Generally speaking, we pick the oldest buildings, the buildings that have air handling units or hot water heaters or furnaces that are 25, 30 years old, that are limping along through their maintenance programs that give us a lot of trouble. And there's two reasons for that. Number one, we want to eliminate our headaches. So if we have an old boiler that is giving us fits that we keep having to do, Band-Aid patches on, that's equipment we want to yank out because it lowers the burden on our staff. It's also a great candidate, by the way, for the Electrifying Community Buildings program and the Commercial Industrial Buildings program through Maryland Energy Administration. The second reason is the older equipment is the least efficient equipment, just, full stop. If you have a furnace that is 25 years old, it's probably less efficient than a furnace that is 5 years old. So you just start with the oldest equipment and work your way forward. And it aligns, more often than not, it aligns with the replacement schedule that you'd already be looking at. The key piece of advice is, don't just do an in-kind replacement. Don't yank out that furnace and put a new furnace in. Think about what types of technologies might be more appropriate.
Excellent. Let's see. I think we might be able to get to maybe 2 more questions before we need to wrap things up. Again, thank you everyone in the audience for being so engaged. Let's see here. We have this question asking, has UMBC pursued controls optimization such as runwise to reduce HVAC system emissions?
So we have. I will admit, this is an area where I don't have as much experience and insight, but yes, building controls and automation is absolutely part of the decarbonization strategy. You want to be operating as efficient as possible. So to the extent that building controls and technologies like the one that was mentioned, yes, absolutely, that should be part of a comprehensive strategy. It's just not an area that I have my fingers in quite as much.
All right. Let's see. Is UMBC considering geothermal heating and cooling, which does not have the performance issues during extreme heat and cold conditions?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a very promising technology for us. In particular, we're looking at it as a solution to some of our district energy systems. So again, we have these old legacy systems that send hot water all throughout campus. There is not an easy way to replace that technology at the source, but we're looking at peers and case studies. Princeton is one good example where they've done some very innovative work with geothermal and geoexchange, and we're hopeful that that can be a promising option for us. So we're not too far along in terms of the conceptual design, But we do think that that is likely to be one of the technologies that we lean into.
All right, let's do one more and then I will wrap things up here. Let's see. All right, Taylor, for any LEED buildings where you have an energy model, how are you finding that actual energy use compares to the model predicted energy use?
Yeah, interesting. So let me go a little off script on this one. I will tell you, I have not personally had insight into seeing that before and after data, right? A consultant tells you one thing when you design the building, and then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but over a course of years, you see that your buildings fall out of sync and perform, quite low. What I would say, and this is, from what I am hearing from peers and other jurisdictions that have building performance standards, for example, Massachusetts and Boston, they have a well-established building performance program. What these peers have seen is that when you institute a building energy performance program, those buildings are the first ones to correct, because it basically means taking another look at your set points, your deferred maintenance, your controls, all the things that you kind of, right, wrong, or other kind of let get out of sync. Those are the low-hanging fruit to go after. So what they've actually seen in these jurisdictions is, yes, your buildings have fallen out of the design parameters that they, were originally promised. But when you institute a building energy performance standard, you actually see the buildings get back into alignment with how they were supposed to be performing all along. So I think this is actually an opportunity, not a curse.
All right. Thank you again, Taylor. We are going to wrap things up now. Huge shout out, Taylor, to you and your team for volunteering to be our featured guest today.
Happy to support.
This was an excellent presentation. I think we all had a lot to learn, some really great key takeaways. Thank you so much for sharing your building decarbonization experience. And for everyone on the line, please just note, I will be circling back with a follow-up email with links to any of the resources mentioned throughout the webinar, as well as a copy of the slide deck, link to the YouTube recording once that is available. So you will have all of that. And if we didn't get to answer any of your questions, please feel free to reach out to either us at the Maryland Clean Buildings Hub, or Taylor, if you are open to it.
Absolutely.
Okay, to Taylor and his wonderful team over at UMBC. So thank you again for everyone for joining us today, and take care. Have a great rest of your afternoon. All right, bye.